Hi everyone! Today I'm going to show you how to make a couple of cards using MFT Stamps' new birthday cake die and Confetti Stencil that was just released as part of their February 2019 release. So to start, we're going to start by working on the clean and simple versions of the card. And I'm going to start by taking out my wonky stitch die by MFT Stamps so that I know where the borders will be on my card panel, and then I'm going to put the birthday cake die right in the middle of that. And I kept all the birthday cake pieces together because I like the layout that it gives just naturally. So you could do your layout like this, you could put the layers closer together, one on top of another, but I just kind of like the wonky style that you get just from using it with all the die cuts intact. So I also cut out a piece of vellum that is as large as the card base because we're going to put that behind our card panel to kind of hold all the pieces intact. And I'm using my Copic markers just to color in the candles and then the little flame on the tip of the candles. And I used the card panel first just so that I knew where to apply the color, and now I'm just kind of going over on the card base itself and adding the color, the flame, and the candles. And I'm just checking to make sure it all lines up, and it does. And I like the softness that you get from putting the vellum behind the card panel. So now we're going to attach the vellum, and I'm just going to use some tape runner for that. And then we're going to attach the whole entire thing to the A2 size card base. For the individual layers of the cake, I cut them out 3 times and glued the 3 layers together just so that they would stick out against the card panel. And I colored them with Copic markers off screen in some soft colors using, this one is G20. And then I also use BG000 for a layer, and then R30 for one of the other layers. And then the cake stand is in T1 and T0. I'm just putting some delicate little decorations on a couple of the cake panels with my white gel pen. So I just added some diagonal stripes to the bottom layer. Then I'm going to add some vertical stripes and some little polka dots to the top layer. And again, for all these layers, they are 3 die cuts thick. So each of them, I cut them out on 110-pound Neenah Solar White cardstock, and I did that 3 times. And then I just tape them together and then apply them to the card base. So we're just going to finish that up and then add on the cake stand as well. And I just really like the soft colors here. This is really different from the cards I usually do. My cards are pretty bright and maybe a little bit overkill here and there, but last night when I came up with this design, I was just in a clean and simple mood. So to finish off the look, I didn't want it to be too clean and simple. I'm just going to add some clear sequins in varying sizes. And I'm going to show you another version in a second that doesn't have the sequins in case you want to have a super clean and simple version. And for a card like this, I was trying to think if there was any good place to put a sentiment on the front. And I couldn't really find one. I thought it might clutter up the clean and simple design. So we're just going to put the sentiment on the inside. And that's the second version of the card without the sequins. And now we're going to move on to the opposite of a clean and simple card. I'm not sure if you call it dirty and complicated or what, but this is going to be our light up version of the card. And to start, I use that same wonky stitch die, and I cut out the candles on the card panel because that's where our light up feature is going to appear. And now we're going to use some Distress Oxide inks to make the background of this card. And this card panel is on Bristol cardstock. I just like that for when I'm blending Distress inks, even Distress Oxide inks, although they can blend on Neenah Solar White, but I'm always one who gets like little smudges when I do it, and I wanted this one to be smudge free if possible. So I'm going to use yellow first, and I wanted there to be a little bit of a yellow glow around the candles, even though we are going to have this light up, so it's going to be nice and bright and yellow and shiny anyway, but just to, I guess, add to that effect, I also made the area around the candles yellow. And then I'm going to use a whole bunch of other pastel shades. So the Distress Oxide inks I'm using here are Squeezed Lemonade, Twisted Citron, Tumbled Glass. We're also going to have some Shaded Lilac and Spun Sugar. And we're just going to kind of apply that in, I guess, rainbow format from the top to the bottom. And then once we have all of our colors applied, I'm going to take the Confetti Stencil by MFT Stamps, and this is also part of their February release. And there are two different stencils, and you kind of use them together, and I'll show you how that works here. So we're going to take the stencil that has the larger pieces of confetti first, and I'm just going to go over the stencil with the same colors of Distress Oxide inks that I had used before. And I don't even think I inked things up again because there was enough ink on the blenders themselves. And then that's going to give us our first layer, kind of light. And then I'm going to take the second stencil with the smaller pieces, and they're also staggered so they appear in different spots than the first set of confetti did. And I'm just going to go over that with my same color Distress Oxide inks again. And then I took my spray gun, sprayed it, and drying it off with a paper towel, and then I'm gonna hit it with the heat gun also to make it dry quicker. At this point, I'm not so crazy about the purple pieces of confetti. I didn't like the way the color looked, but we're gonna fix that in a second. But first, we're going to put a piece of heavy vellum behind the candles and the flames, because that's where our light up feature is going to appear. So we want that covered somewhat, but we still want the light to be able to shine through. So I'm doing the same exact technique that I had done on the first cake to make these layers. They're all three layers high, so they stand off of the card. I'm using some iridescent glitter cardstock for the cake layers, some silver silk cardstock by Tonic for the cake stand, and then just plain white Nina Solar White cardstock for the frosting on the cake and the two little layers of frosting that I'll show you in a second. And these layers, I'm also spreading them apart, kind of like the first one, although they're a little bit closer together than our first cake, and they're a little less wonky of a style. But I kind of like both of them, and I really like the iridescent layers here. I was struggling a little bit in the beginning trying to figure out how to get the cake layers to stand off the page because the background was so colorful, and I didn't want it to be just white, but then in the end I settled on the iridescent glitter cardstock, and I think that looks nice. So to soften up our purple confetti pieces, I'm just gonna put a whole bunch of dots on them, white dots with a white gel pen, and then we're gonna add a whole bunch of white specks to the background as well, just to add to the festive confetti atmosphere, and also to help blend the darker spots of confetti into the background a little bit nicer, I think. So that's all I'm doing. I'm just kind of dotting and flicking and making little specks with my white gel pen. You could also do this, I guess, with like a paint splatter technique, but I just like to use my white gel pen. It's a little bit neater, have a little bit more control with it, and it's usually more handy than getting out the paint. All right, so now we're going to work on our light up feature for the card. And my trick for light up cards is you want to make sure that your back panel is the mirror, like completely mirrors your front panel. So I cut both panels from the same, using the same wonky stitch die so that I can line them up perfectly. And I also made sure to note where I want my lights to appear. So I actually put the front panel on top of this back panel and then added the little yellow dots so that I know exactly where the little flames are. And then to build out the circuit, the pieces that you need are some copper tape, a little lithium battery, and some LED lights by Chibitronics that I'll show you in a second. Okay, so we're going to start by applying the copper tape following the two little tracks that we drew, and the tracks that are surrounding the lights, that the lights are going to be connected to, they should be about 1/4 of an inch apart. So if you see where the yellow dots are, where the flames are, those two lines are about like between 1/4 of an inch and 1/2 of an inch apart. And the reason you need that distance, you'll see in a second when we add the lights, is because the two ends of the LED lights need to touch each end of the copper tape to make the mechanism work. So once you have your tape applied to the card panel or the back panel, I like to go over it with a bone folder just to make sure there are no creases in the tape and that the tape is firmly adhered to the card panel. I find the connectivity is the best that way. So now this is where I'm showing you how to apply the lights. So you apply the lights so that both copper ends of the lights match or touch the copper tape. And that's why we want it to be about 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 of an inch distance between the lights. And there I was just kind of brightening up the flames on the candles by putting a Copic marker over the flame as well, just to help with the yellow effect. So I decided to switch out my colors there. That's why that one little light just kind of flew off the page, because I wanted 2 yellows in the middle and then 2 whites on the end. Just make it interesting looking. I'm just making sure all my lights work. And then the last part of this is to apply the foam tape. And for this, you need 3 layers of foam tape to make sure that the little, the push button mechanism to start the lights works. If you only use 2 layers, then the lights will always be in the on motion because there's not enough room between the layers for there not to be pressure on the battery. I guess that's the way to say it. So you want 3 layers, and you want to make sure you also encase your battery in the layers of foam tape, otherwise it'll fall out and nothing will work. Then the last part is to just put the 2 panels together, and because I made them exactly the same size, it was pretty easy to do. Now I'm just checking so everything, the mechanism works. I'm happy, and now it's time to add the sentiment to the card. And I'm going to put the sentiment on the inside of the card, and I'm going to say happy birthday to wonderful you. It's with one of the birthday sentiment stamp sets by MFT stamps. It's an older one, and I use some Lawn Fawn peacock ink, and then also I think pink flamingo ink for the sentiment. Then we're going to put everything onto an A2 size card base. I'm going to add a little press me in the corner just so that the recipient knows to press to make something happen with the card. And then here we go. So that is our light up version of the birthday cake card. It's lots of fun. And then let's just take a look at all the cards that we made today. So we have our 2 clean and simple versions, and then our complicated light up version, which actually isn't that complicated. I hope you give it a try. Actually, I hope you give all of these cards a try. They were really fun to make, and I think anyone you send them to will really love them. Thanks so much for joining me today, everyone, and I will see you again soon in the next video.